Honored, excited. I can't sum it up any better. Excited to talk with Merril Hodge, merrilhodge.com, on Twitter, at Merril Hodge, a longtime NFL analyst, giving us breakdowns of what's going on in the games and a lot of the prospects. Merril, good morning. Thanks for hopping on with us in Portland. It's the first time we've had you on the show. I have admired your work for a very long time. Please tell me you're in a wins or not right now. Please.
I am. I'll just tell you I am, even though if I'm not.
Okay.
That'll just, okay, well, tell me, is it raining?
Yes.
Snowing?
It's pouring.
In Portland?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Every time I've been there, no matter when I came, it was just pouring rain.
Yeah.
It's a pretty place when it doesn't rain, but man, does it rain a lot there.
It does. You have a lot of Caleb Williams thoughts that have circulated. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, but we've also had a lot of people in similar roles. We had Brian Baldinger on yesterday, and admittedly said he's a little biased because he's known Caleb for a long time, but really likes Caleb, thinks he's everything as a prospect. You don't feel as strongly as that. Do you ever talk with people like Brian Baldinger or others in the industry that are of similar, you break tape down and just kind of share thoughts on why each of you maybe feels different on different prospects?
Well, listen, I've learned I'm a product of a lot of people. Okay, so I started in the National Football League. I played for Chuck Noll. I played for Bill Cowher. I played back-to-back Hall of Famers. Worked with guys like Mike Dick, Jimmy Johnson, John Gruden, Marty Schottenheimer, Bill Parcells, Tony Dungy. I've coached every level of football. But the experience of playing has always struck my passion of evaluating. I've been doing this for like 40 years, from a player, coach, scouting evaluation, the whole different process. And there's a lot you can learn from people. I tell people all the time that, you've heard of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, there's no more evidence than talent is in the eye of the beholder. And then here's why I think that I see it a lot differently than most people. I don't look at where they're playing. I look at where they're going to play. And that's not easy, and that's not easy for fans to understand, but everything changes from what they did in college, okay? Even the field is different, and most people don't even know that. So the hash marks are narrow in the National Football League, and that changes how the game is played. The game is played in the NFL in the middle of the field, like college is played on the perimeter of the field based on the hash marks being wider. Offenses that you run in college are different that you're going to run in the NFL. Defenses you're going to face are much different than you're going to face in the National Football League, and coverages and pressures and a certain level of competition is equal. Like in college, 70% of the time, our guys are better than your guys, and that's just college football. We're going to win. That's not true in the National Football League ever, and I don't care what their record is. We played the Patriots one year. They'd lost 10 in a row. We beat them on a goal line stand. We left the game going, how in the world are they 0-11? They're the hardest team that we played all year. So it's a different environment that they're heading into. And then there's certain things and certain ways you have to play in the National Football League that you don't get away with that you did in college. And that's why when you hear a person's exciting, well, that's not a skill set. That's just a bonus. Or he's a great kid. Another bonus, not a skill set. All those are pluses. There's a different environment and skill set that is required for the National Football League that has not changed. And it still exists. And if you don't have that skill set initially, then the learning curve becomes even harder. And that's why you got to show some type of polished aspect of what it takes to transition to the National Football League, from my perspective, to have a shot at it. And if you think about this, there's been two guys in the last 5 to 6 years that have done that have actually had a somewhat polished skill set that showed they could orchestrate and demonstrate what is required to play in the NFL. Maybe Joe Burrow and C.J. Stroud. So if we use those as our standard, then I'll explain what I mean by that. At the end of the day, you have to function from the pocket. How do you need to function from the pocket? These two things are required. They are intertwined. You can't have one without the other. You have to be accurate, and you have to be a very good processor. And there's levels of that processing aspect we can talk about, and accuracy. But if those two things are polished and are extraordinary, like C.J. Stroud was, then you start looking into, pocket movement, anticipation, toughness, leadership, Shoot, then number 5, you start getting into arm strength and all that other stuff. And then you start building from that. Well, if you don't have accuracy, you have no shot. If you are not a good processor and you really struggle in that, you have no shot. You can help processing sometimes based on, what they played in, how they did process. Is there improvement that can be happening there? Yes. Accuracy, if you're erratic, you're erratic. You can hone your skill set a little bit, but if you think of the level of learning now, okay, let's say you got an accuracy problem. We got to work on that. We can work on that, but we're only going to get so much better. And you got to learn the offense, and you got to learn how you execute this offense against the best players in the world, against the best defenses and best coverage. That is a monumental task if you have all of those issues, and you have to translate to the National Football League. So the less you have, the better chance you have of translating. So that's where I start with it, and I look at every player the same way. What do they have? What can you – and it isn't, people go, I can coach that. There's nothing you can't coach and teach. That's not the question you should be asking. What can be taught and what can be learned and applied? And what can a player take and apply to it? I didn't teach anything. But what can truly be learned and applied is where your challenge is. And those things are never asked. Just coach that'll fix that. Man, you don't always fix things. You can't give somebody instincts, can't give somebody toughness, can't fix stupid. There's a lot of things you can't fix. Everybody agree, you can't give somebody speed, but all of a sudden you can give them all these other things. And that's actually where the problem lies in the transition. And look at the history of football in the National Football League. Like, everybody gets drafted, 30% of them are going to make it. 30%. On average, 30%. So we'd be better off going, hey, they all are terrible, and you'd be 70% right. So, but you got to go different layers of that. And I'll just leave it. I'll leave it with this.
Yeah.
If you cannot watch coaching tape on them, you cannot know. There is no way to know the truth. You can't watch games on Saturday or Sunday and tell me that you know about a player or a team. TV lies, highlights really lie. And that's the problem. See, with fans, you put together a highlight reel. I could put a highlight reel together on everybody on this board, and they would look incredible. Like the guy that I have the biggest question marks about. I would not touch him in the first round, and there's not one piece of evidence that I just went through that I would even say he rates high enough to take a shot at because my job is on the line, and that'd be Drake May. I would never touch him in the first round. No way would I touch him. And I hear these comparisons to Josh. I'm like, what? I don't. What comparison are they making? Arm, not even close. Ability to run and mobility, not even close. And he is erratic everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, everywhere. So, that's just the level of how you view things and how they, and do they have, and honestly, a lot of this, what's unfortunate, and people think that this is bad, and it's not bad. It would be so much better if a lot of these guys didn't get drafted in the first round, they got drafted in the second. Because you know what happens? All of those levels of expectation and that I tell people all the time, people get, mostly quarterbacks, but this can happen to any player, get ruined mentally way before they get ruined physically. If they say, I guess Justin Fields is a great example. Shoot, Kenny Pickett's another good example. Walking into an environment and all of a sudden you have Justin Fields. In 4 years, he's had now 4 offensive coordinator changes. I can't even tell you. Tell me how in the world, in business, just take a business, for example. Let's take your own job, for example. Let's say that every day they decided to change what you did in the morning. They change every day that you did. You could never be good and consistent at something. You never get a flow or get to develop a skill at that. And, the kid has just not had a fair chance, You see, I know nobody that could function under that. The best can't function under that. That's one of the big reasons Troy Aikman left his career. Once his coordinator left, things started changing. Things weren't consistent. He's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Merril, when you're going through this film from this quarterback class, how much are you taking into factor what they're being asked from their college? Like, are there times where, like, you're going through Jaden Daniels' film or Drake May's film, and you see them miss a hot route or you see them miss a pre-snap read, and you ask or you talk with their coaches or people who've been around them, where it's like, did they know to look for a pre-snap read because they're going to have to look for that in the NFL? Or is it one of those things where they're not asked that in college? You have to look at the Wonderlic, or you have to look at other testing where it's like, okay, they have the brain capacity to make these reads. They just haven't been taught it.
It's a Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy thing, I think, that you're kind of saying, right? Like, one
Right.
didn't have to do as much as the other was leading his team offensively. The other was kind of handing off and trusting a run game and then making some throws
like,
here and there.
Like Mahomes didn't know what a mic was until he was 2 years in the NFL because no one asked him to learn that.
Right. Correct. Okay, so now listen, there is that level of coaching that they just don't get in college, and you have to understand a little bit. That has to come into part of the equation. What are you taught, and then what can you learn? That's why I go back to what you watch a guy who doesn't read. It's funny that you just mentioned Jaden Daniels. I was watching, I think it was a Texas A&M game, and I was like, man, he doesn't even recognize the front, nor the potential pressure. And the reason I say that is because I can see where his head is, and then when he snaps the ball, he's oblivious to somebody coming off. Now I'm looking at where he's going to play. Okay, if you're functioning like that, then that's just one example. Okay, so you can't take one thing, but he didn't understand, and that's so you go, okay, how much was he really taught? To you guys' point, what is his level of understanding? Let's go back to where he's playing. Okay, the pressures that come in college are just there's no short of high school. I mean, they are. Here's the biggest transition to the National Football League, no matter what player or position you're talking about. It's the IQ of the game. That is number one. I don't care what position you play. If you're not a smart player, if you don't understand the game, and you mentioned the Wonderlic, that's the stupidest thing ever to compare somebody to they're smart enough to play in NFL. I mean, you should lose that right now. If anybody, you know what they said about C.J. Stroud? Because I evaluated C.J. Stroud I was doing some stuff with the Steelers and scouting. And I said, this guy is special. He could wear a gold jacket one day. He does things that are rare. And the first thing I said, well, he didn't do well on the Wonderlic test. I said, okay, time out. He doesn't play like that. So what are we doing on Sundays? Are we taking the Wonderlic or are we playing football? Because if we're playing football, I don't see that guy make any mistakes. He's as sharp and fast as anybody I've seen. He's like Joe Burrow. So I could care less what they did on the Wonderlic. I took the Wonderlic test. When I'm doing that, this is the stupidest thing ever. But is he relevant to football? It's relevant to testing. That's all it's relevant to. Mm-hmm. It's the dumbest thing ever. Now listen, just because and there's been guys that have been bad on the Wonderlic, but they've been bad football players and not very smart football players either. You knew that by watching tape. I didn't need a test to tell me that. But that Wonderlic test is the stupidest thing I've ever seen and or done. Or took as an evaluation. I never take a tool like that and go, yeah, the guy can play or can't play. I know that by watching tape. I don't need a Wonderlic test to tell me that.
Bo Nix, Michael Penix are big prospects, obviously local here. We tie in with the Ducks. We're the home of the Ducks. We've watched a lot of Huskies. What is your evaluation or thoughts on Bo Nix, Michael Penix? A lot of people debate, obviously, because of the rivalry, but their mocks are anywhere from mid-first to early second. How do you evaluate Bo Nix and Penix when you've looked at the tape?
They're both rock solid. And so I'll take Bo Nix. Some of Bo Nix's strength is like everything across the board is rock solid. You're just like, then you can trust him. He executes, and he executes the offense, and that's what you need to do. Is there any eliteness in him in area? No. In fact, the best thing that could happen to Bo Nix would be to be, okay, here's the case. Here's my point. He'd be a great kid to get in the second round. You draft him in the second round, it's a whole different level of expectations of the rush to run out there and the pressure that's going to mount. And keep in mind these expectations when you are drafted. Number one, you are now the only member they have is somebody who gets drafted in the first round and came in there and took a team from almost last to playoffs is C.J. Stroud. That's your standard now. And that is such an unfair standard because so many things have to take place. Okay, what type of coaching are you getting? What kind of people are around you? What kind of team are you going to? The value of sitting there and taking some time. I don't care how skilled you might be. You got to be extremely skilled to really transition and play as a rookie, as a quarterback. And the more they were able to sit, the better off they would be. But that would be the best thing for him. And I would not put him as a first-round grade. I wouldn't put Michael Penix as a first-round grade. And for some of the, even though they're a little different, because one thing that Penix does a lot that does translate to the National Football League is they shift in motion. They do a lot of stuff. They move a lot of traffic. So listen, moving stuff isn't, people think it's moving offense is the big deal. That's not the big deal. it's oftentimes when you do that, you're changing what the defense is doing too. So you got to register that too. You got to process all of that. It isn't just our movement; it's their movement too. And how does that? And he actually does a really good job of processing that. Why did Peyton Manning do no shifts, no motions? That's why. He didn't want anybody to be moving. He wanted you to sit in something, because now if you're sitting in something, I know you can do only one of 4 or 5 things. Now, in the NFL, you can do one of 4 or 5 things. That's one thing that you might be sitting in. In college, you know you're going to get what you're getting. Whereas the NFL is completely different. That's why they did the shifts of motion. So when you do shifts of motions, people could say that's a really cool thing for your offense, but there's sometimes players, I'm not saying Peyton Manning couldn't handle that. He could handle it. He just chose to do it this way because he was so good at knowing what you're going to do and dialing up something that I'll be able to sting you with. Yeah. I get to the best play possible to attack what you're doing. But I like that he operates like that. He has a real dynamic arm. He's accurate. And I know this, all of his injuries will play a role. Now I understand he got a complete bill of health. Some people will use that and just go, boy, I'm worried that he's going to get – I get asked that all the time. Well, what about his injuries? I go, well, I'll use my own career. I played like 15 games from my sophomore year, and I started as a freshman. I played 15 games for 4 years. I couldn't stay healthy. I don't think I played ever more than 5 games in a year. Maybe my senior year, I take that back. I think I played 10. Then after my freshman year, I started my sophomore year, and I played 13 straight years without ever missing a game or a down or a practice from college to the NFL. And I'm like, I was in Chicago. We drafted a tight end to come out of Illinois, and the raving was, this guy played 4 years, never missed a game. I think he played 4 games for us because he's hurt all the time. So, so you can't. I can't predict it. Joe Burrow. Everybody's like, well, did he get hurt? You just can't. And the kid may never get hurt again. But I think he's another guy that best if he were in the second round. I don't see his skill set being first round worthy because of the ultimate pressure that's put on these guys, and they just don't have the skill set to withstand what is coming their way, especially if they go to a bad team. That's the other element of this, and all the things that have to go right, and then how you got to develop and evolve. And people think listen, I'd like going the first round too. And I came out, of course you do. And I understand all of that, want to do that. But man, the best thing for a long career, and a successful one and a mature one and a developed one is to not get put in a place that you just are not prepared to handle. And those two guys, they almost fall in the same category for me. They're uniquely a little different, but they do a great job of functioning the system that they're in. They're accurate. They process the system that they're in. They function in a dirty pocket. Okay, now Penix actually gets a little more erratic. It's ironic, that's a little question mark for me. It's not bad, but it's a concern because that's where he's going. Okay, he's not going to be sitting in a pocket for 3 or 4 seconds and being able to pick some of the best receivers at the college level. Okay, my guys are good as your guys. That pocket's going to be 30 now. I'm going to have to move and throw, and being able to do that is critical. He's he struggles a little bit in that department, but it's not so bad that I'm like, oh, he'll never do that, because he does enough good in it that I lean towards he can work through that because he shows me enough evidence of that.
Yeah. Merril, I'm sure you hear this every interview you do. This is such good insight and breakdown of the nuance that goes into just looking at the position by itself, let alone who it is and where they're from and where they're going. We are in radio, so we're already against it, and so
breaks, baby.
I know I hate the breaks, but I'll tell you what. I have a contact with you. I'd love to get you on closer to the draft because I know you're starting to break down some of the line prospects. We got some line prospects locally. Yep. I'd love to catch up with you in maybe a month or so and get you back on and talk about some other positions as well.
Reach out, boys. Love to do it, and I hope the sunshine is bright for you guys today.
It is, my man. Thank you for hopping on with us.
See you guys.
All right, there we go. Merril Hodge. MerrilHodge.com. Great stuff from him.